All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another very special edition of the Know Your Pharmacist Livestream. I'm your host, Dr. Joaquin Acosta, CEO of Pharmtrue, and tonight we are celebrating World Pharmacist Day in the most enlightening way possible. First off, let's give a big shout out to our sponsors who make this show possible. You guys are incredible. Pharmtrue, High Horse, the Tricom Alliance, and Vado Speedway Park together. We're cultivating a community where knowledge meets passion and science harmonizes wellness. Now let's talk about tonight's captivating lineup, guys. We're diving deep into the CVS Walkout. I'm sure you've heard about that by now over the weekend. Protest that's shaking the very foundations of pharmacy as we know it. We'll explore the human stories behind the headlines and discuss what this means for the future of healthcare. In our Tech Talk segment, we're going to be brainstorming the fascinating world of fitness gamification. How can we make exercise not just a routine, but an engaging, rewarding experience? In our Herbal Wellness Corner, all about the transformative power of plant medicine in oncology. We're writing history, not just reading it, guys, as we delve into the latest research, patient stories, and the kickoff of the Butt Cancer Program. And in our Enlightenment Hour, we're going to discuss the profound impact of words and communication in the healing process. We'll take a look at a video talking about some experts who will share some insights on how language can be a tool for positive health outcomes from the University of Arizona's Integrative Medicine channel. And don't forget our community spotlight, where we're going to be highlighting the Mesilla Valley Transportation Charity Golf Tournament. Not just about the game, it's about making a difference in the lives who need it most. And last but not least, our Men's Health Minute will tackle the psychology behind the traits of an alpha male. Interesting, right? All you see the Andrew Tates of the world and this, that, and the other. What may or may not be the fluff behind that to actually dissect. What does science say about it? Let's find out. So sit back, relax, and let's collaborate on this journey of discovery and empowerment. We got a packed show, and I promise you won't want to miss a single moment, guys. Let's connect, learn, and let's make this World Pharmacist Day a memorable one. All right, so talking about World Pharmacist Day, first and foremost, guys, talking about the walkout. Over 12 CVSs now in Kansas have been affected in the Kansas, Missouri area. Very, very interesting, right? So pharmacists are certainly laying low right now as far as, showing their faces and identities here. They have been talking to the news behind, a nameless face as to not, unfortunately, be at some point to jeopardize their job anymore. What I really think, is the big powerful thing here is the impact of, these CVSs are shutting down and what that actually means, right? Like, store hours and volume and those things are going to definitely depend based on region and location. But, these are like probably looking at, $5 to $10 million a year stores at the very least. So when you're looking at, 12 of those babies shutting down, that's not only a huge loss of profit for the CVS store chain, they may be losing customers as well because, again, people need their medicine. Where are they going to go when they don't have it? Think about the mess that's already creating, trying to transfer medication out of a place that's not open. That creates a real problem. And what I'm hoping that the, pharmacists of CVS and at least the other pharmacies that are affected by this, Walgreens, you guys are notorious. We're not going to count you out of this one. But for sure, out of those two behemoths, it would be awesome to support some more unity there between the pharmacists who are, walking out and, what can that actually do to make a change, right? So CVS corporate, I saw, is trying to send their executives down to try to cover shifts and this, that, and the other. But that's how it works in this world. You can't send enough executives to 12 stores or anything like that. I mean, they are searching for answers here. And the human part is just treat your people right, provide them enough, staffing and expectation to keep patients safe throughout their job, right? You shouldn't be having, pharmacists all across the board, all across the country feeling like they are putting patient safety at jeopardy with the volume of work that they have and the little amount of time or help that they have to do it. It's absolutely insane. So advocating for World Pharmacist Day, in the profession of pharmacy, in this very small world of pharmacy, many pharmacists shame on being a retail pharmacist. They look at it like, hey, I failed, so therefore I'm going to be a retail pharmacist. dead ass. Like, that's literally the truth. Like, pharmacists will say, unless I'm working for a hospital or unless I'm working for the clinic, I'm a failure of a pharmacist because I ended up in a retail store. And, it's just common knowledge that the retail pharmacies are an absolute tragic place to work. If you're a healthcare provider and you're somebody that went to, right, a doctor school and things like that, you probably don't necessarily expect to sit there feeling like McDonald's employees have more time to do a better job of work that they do than you do in a pharmacy. And, I know that sounds trying to do extraordinary amounts of volume going into the cold and flu season with a thing like trifecta time of, COVID-19, still recovering from the pandemic, the flu in general, and RSV, guys. Pharmacy business ramps up in the winter, and that's where those pharmacists in Kansas City were literally already anticipating that. The whole thing started, literally it began when one pharmacy manager got fired because check this out. He got fired because they were trying to make basically their store go close on the weekends to go cover other stores that had walkouts and not enough staffing, right? And so basically, workplace safety at the end of the day was the reason that all those pharmacists cited, the workload being literally so heavy and the amount of the staff that is allotted to be so low that, a pharmacist truly feels unable to go to the bathroom during the shift. And again, I remember those days. I kind of used to like those days because, again, they would fly by so fast. But, my, at the time, 27-year-old mentality of, speed and power definitely was obviously, able to keep up with the pace. But at the same time, could I see the room for error there? Could I see the burnt out employees all over the place? Yes, yes, and yes. It, you know what I mean? It turned into a culture of, right, things like just pass the buck and just pretend like you're not there, and how long can you do that for how many hours? And right, again, you see that in many workplaces. Pharmacy is a classic example. And again, World Pharmacist Day is an absolute great time to think about and consider the fact that, right, you don't blame the pharmacy staff and those teams for, the fact that there's only one person there to serve you. You blame the fact that, they have been nickel and dimed all the way down to the minutes of their time, which should be, but, in those big situations, the pharmacy industry has literally gotten out of control. And, now this is the first time, ever that you truly see some of that clapback. And again, Walmart and those things prevent against unionizing, right? You can't even literally sign on for Walmart unless you sign like 15 contracts that you're not going to unionize. And if you're a manager and you see it, you have to report it, blah, blah, blah. So completely understood, get it. I get both sides of the equation, but the side of the equation is there's room to make those expectations, a little bit better for your pharmacy teams that are out there in the retail pharmacy industry. Again, retail pharmacists are truly, your cornerstone of healthcare in the community. They are right there at any single possible intervention. Who are you going to call and get a true doctor on the phone? Maybe not a medical doctor, but a PharmD, doctor of pharmacy. And you can ask questions about over-the-counter medications. You can ask questions that pharmacists can refer, whether or not you may or may not need to, go to an emergency room, and they can give you a strong professional recommendations on things like that, or what doctor to see, or what questions to ask your doctor. Pharmacists are so useful and they're there, fully accessible. A little underappreciated, not going to lie. I think that's probably the truth for the industry. And, nurses and many other medical professionals are in that same boat. So I'm not putting up us against the rest of that. It's just that, food for thought. So World Pharmacist Day, thank your pharmacists. Anyways, guys, talking in our tech talk here, looking at gamification, top 10 fitness gamification examples to get fit in 2023. And, I thought this was cool because, some people may not necessarily think about, hey, fitness is a game for me. And I think some people do, right? Some people will go out and play recreational sports or whatever that might be, right? But what about for the rest of, people that may not have a community of, people to go compete against all the time? Maybe you don't have a rec league that you can go and, do the 5:30 p.m. practices or whatever that might be. Well, have you ever thought of the fact that, some of these games on the phone and things actually truly do a decent job of gamifying fitness and moving? The number one example here is going to be Pokemon Go, and we'll get to that at the end. And I think, it's an interesting concept for sure and worth noticing. But looking, down here about human-focused fitness, they've got things now like interactive gyms where you can see yourself on a treadmill, looping laps out in a stadium virtually, kind of augmented versus whoever else is running. And so again, where this takes it in the industry is pretty cool, because you look at like fitness apps or gamifying ways to gamify fitness. These just may not be your traditional methods of thinking, oh, well, I have to go to the gym to burn calories to, stay healthy and keep my LDLs down or whatever that might be, right? So again, there's these apps that, can help gamify that a little bit, right? You've got your leaderboards with your Fitbit, your Apple Watch. Do you look at your goals getting achieved on those things? Do you share that with family and friends? That can perhaps be a good tool for people. If you're not doing it, consider it. Other one, this one here, game technique of Shape Up, and it's an extreme workout challenge. And this is Xbox One stuff. Again, some of it is games, some of it's apps. You could get, obviously, some of you guys might use digital trainers through Android or Apple. Very, very interesting. Some of these you can even get rewarded for, whatever activities those may be, like paid, right? Which is pretty cool. So, some of these, I don't know if anybody's ever dabbled with the virtual reality stuff, but this is interesting. The second highest rated one here, for those of you who have some of these systems or whatnot, may be very interesting to consider how to get, a full amount of movement going in a confined space while having a blast. Whoever may or may not be using things like, augmented reality or VR systems. This is a Beat Saber game. You can use lightsabers, slash at stuff, and truly start turning into a sweaty workout session, right? They're looking here, cardio in disguise, upper body workout, flexi agility, all this stuff, convenience. And then the last but not least, Pokemon Go. Even more interesting, good reasons to go get your steps, go see new places, to go outside, get that vitamin D, walking, guys, 10,000 steps a day. Again, try to look at people who get consistent amounts of 10,000 steps a day and tell me if they have health problems. That's a really good question, guys, for sure. So again, thinking of ways to make it easier, funner, better, Pokemon Go is one of those, oddly enough. And you may not consider it, but I thought, hey, wow, I didn't necessarily think about it like that. But, in the back end, when you can really look at the other triple benefits from all of that, you're like, wow, this is great. You get to obviously see new places, connect socially, walk everywhere, steps track, whole thing. Gamified. Boom. So if you guys aren't gamifying your fitness to any degree, whether it's going out there on the basketball court for recreational games or kickball or whatever that may be, maybe you don't have those opportunities. Maybe you should consider what are the digital ways that you could possibly do that. And some people obviously can just go and watch a workout video and do that at the house and be just fine. Some people can just go to their routine and do the gym, and that's just fine. And maybe this isn't for you, but maybe it is. Maybe you can take that up another notch, right? You never know. Cool. So that's our Enlightenment. No, that's not our Enlightenment hour. That was our tech talk. Moving on to Enlightenment hour here. Going to show a video, guys, again from the Arizona U of A Integrative Medicine podcast. Dr. Andrew Weil. This guy's one of the top guys in the integrative medicine space across the country and things. Well, interesting. Let's just watch this. I won't get into too much detail because let's let them talk.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Victoria.
Today we have Dr. Steve Bierman joining us, and he is truly an expert on the art of language and how we communicate with our patients.
Favorite subject of mine. I think we're very lucky to have Steve as a teacher in our programs. He's one of the, I think, most powerful explainers of the power of ideas and how that can either impact the possibility of healing or work against it.
And there are going to be tips for you about what you can do if you do feel like you might have gotten hexed, how to mitigate that. So let's welcome Steve. Dr. Steve Bierman received his MD from Northwestern University School of Medicine and worked for nearly 20 years as an emergency physician at Scripps Memorial Hospital in Encinitas. He became well known for performing painless injections and laceration repairs, and even reducing the pain of childbirth. In private practice, Dr. Bierman learned the importance of communication when addressing autoimmune diseases, depression, and cancer. Dr. Bierman teaches how we can focus the power of ideas to access our healer within. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And one of the things I'd like to ask is that you have a concern that patients can be inadvertently harmed during typical communications that are embedded in the doctor-patient encounter. How did you first become aware of this?
It was a gradual learning, actually, and it connected to my early studies of hypnosis. I have to say this may be surprising. Also, some early readings of books by Dr. Weil and others. In particular, I remember well a chapter on placebo and health and healing that had a profound effect on me. But as I got deeper and deeper into clinical hypnosis, of course, I realized through that the importance of crafting my messages clearly and the impact of ideas on health and healing. And initially, it wasn't clear to me that the words of a physician outside of trance could have a profound impact. But what happened to me was I was working in the emergency room, and over time, it became busier and busier. And I ultimately did not have time to do formal trance inductions. So I abandoned that aspect of the technique and kept closely to the careful language that I had learned. And by happenstance, patient after patient, I realized that trance was just a response I could induce, and that my authority, by virtue of the patient's sense of helplessness and dependency and their attribution of that authority to me, gave me a hypnotic influence, as it does all doctors. And so I began hearing, through the curtain, things other doctors were saying, or in my own mind, things that I might have said, and realizing, no, that's dangerous. That can do harm. And then it's a small jump from that to nocebo effects, and realizing that inadvertently, I don't think any of this is really intended, of course, but inadvertently, doctors often do a lot of harm because they don't realize the hypnotic influence of their words.
So there's a lot to unpack there. And before we start unpacking it, I want to turn to Andy. Andy, you have also spoken about how formative hypnosis training was for you. And of course, the art of medicine, the art of using language well, has always been a part of your conception of integrative medicine.
Yes, and I think Steve and I have similar backgrounds and interests. I took a course in clinical hypnosis after I got out of my clinical training, one of the best courses I've ever taken. And but I've always been fascinated by the power of words, by the placebo response and how that is so misunderstood in medicine, and the inverse of that, sometimes called the nocebo response, negative effects produced through the mind-body connection. And I have just collected in the course of my practice many instances in which doctors, actually, Steve, occasionally it is done intentionally. That's rare, but it happens. But mostly unconsciously hex patients. And I wrote about medical hexing in Health and Healing, and I've seen just some spectacular examples of that.
Andy, would you give one example? Because people may not recognize what medical hexing is.
Well, this is a very glaring example that you've heard me tell before. Some years ago, I had a patient, a middle-aged woman from Helsinki, who came to Tucson to spend some time at Canyon Ranch. She had a fairly early diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. She was very depressed. She came in the winter, and in the course of staying here, brightened up considerably. I think just being in the sunshine and an agreeable climate. But we had several meetings, and at one point she said, "You wouldn't believe what that doctor did to me in Helsinki." She was at the main university hospital, and she said when he gave her the diagnosis, she was having some weakness of multiple sclerosis. He said, "Wait here a minute." He went out and brought a wheelchair in and asked her to sit in the wheelchair. And she said, "Why should I sit in the wheelchair?" He said he wanted her to get a wheelchair and sit in it for an hour a day to practice for the time when she would be disabled.
Wow. That's like a horrific example. Steve, one of the things you talk about is there is a way in which we can mitigate the effects of that kind of medical hexing. Can you talk about what Andy could have said to that woman, or what you would have said to that woman?
Well, sure. It depends on understanding two simple things, really. The nature of our knowledge, the kind of knowledge we as physicians have, which is fundamentally statistical or anecdotal, but never relates directly to the patient who sits before you. That's one thing. And the other is the sheer fallacy of prophecy, which we should all really be instructed on in medical school. I tell my patients frequently, when you feel a hex coming at you,
is there a certain sensation that they get? Yeah.
you feel it. You're instinctively aware that potential damage is being done. When you feel that, recite the mantra I've given you, which is, "You don't know me. You don't know me." But also understand that the guy or woman who's telling you that can't predict their own future, their own tomorrow. So how possibly could they predict yours? And so it's understanding the nature of our knowledge, and that we really can't predict no matter what, because things will always change in the future. A cure for what you think is incurable will be found tomorrow in some cases. Once you have that as your mindset, it becomes much more easy to say it right.
I've read something you wrote where every word matters. And even something as simple as when you're greeting a patient, when you're saying goodbye to a patient, you can infuse those greetings with suggestions that the patient will do well. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I teach that your greeting, for example, is your first opportunity to establish rapport. I mean rapport in a tight sort of methodological way that relates to hypnotic method. It's an imitative technique, and it empowers your words even greater. But it's also your first opportunity to set fear and anxiety aside. So, for example, in the emergency room, I might say, "I see you're bleeding. That must have been really scary, wasn't it?" And their assent to that puts it in the past. Yes, it was. Right? At the same time, I'll be doing other things, breathing with them, matching my vocal energy with them, and so forth, to tighten the rapport and make a greater oneness between the two of us. In terms of goodbyes, that's your last opportunity in that session anyway, to implant a therapeutic suggestion. So instead of saying to someone, as is frequently done, well, you just have to go home and tough it out. It'll take a week or two to get better. Call me if you're not better in 2 weeks. There's a lot of negativity in that. You might say something like this. Some people might take up to a week. On the other hand, I have patients, perhaps very much like you, who get well in a day or two. Why don't you call me tomorrow? Let me know how well you feel.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And Andy, you have a really wonderful closing statement that you sometimes use at the end of your consults.
Well, I often say to patients that I know you can get better. I don't know exactly how you can get better, but I'll give you suggestions of things to try, and you let me know how it goes. And I've had so many patients over the years come back to me and say, the most important thing you did is that you're the only doctor I saw who told me I could get better. And it makes me sad to hear that so few doctors let patients think that they can get better. But this is what I've seen again and again, is that many patients get better. And by the way, that woman with MS, my response to that was to burst out laughing and tell her that I'd seen so many cases where MS goes into remission, and really nobody can predict the course of it.
It sounds like that was a really great way to burst that hex with
Yes.
laughter.
Right.
So I think we have this all over medicine. Like, one of the things I've thought about is the phrase that we used to use for when someone had a very indolent prostate cancer. We used to say watchful waiting. And that sounds okay, but really what it implied to the patient, I think, was that we were waiting for it to get worse. Whereas active surveillance, to me, is a so much more positive term, that we're actively, as their healthcare providers, we're keeping a watch on who they are and how they're doing. But maybe there's a better term yet that implies that they will continue to have an indolent course of prostate cancer. We know that many men die with prostate cancer, not of prostate cancer, and that we could suggest to them that that will be the case.
We have terms like that scattered throughout medicine. The worst, or at least the most prevalent, in my view, is the term chronic. A chronic illness to anyone implies that there isn't and never will be cure. And there's that fallacy of prophecy. How can you know there never will be? And how in that one individual patient can you know that their intrinsic healing capacities won't suddenly arise and extinguish it, like this patient Andy's talking about with MS? You can't possibly know that. So even that word to me is implicit curse. And we really do need to inspect closely the language that we use. It won't happen until we realize that ideas have an impact on health and healing. And we have a scientific underpinning to clinical medicine now that ignores utterly the impact of ideas on everything.
Isn't it astonishing that there is no teaching on the power of words in medical training? I mean, it seems to me that should be a required subject.
We may not realize it, but our labels inhibit us from recognizing that. We call one thing placebo, and we call another thing nocebo, and yet another thing hypnosis, and another thing distraction technique, and without realizing that what's happening here, this is a communication continuum, and that the underlying drivers of ideas producing effects are the same, and that it's the ideas and how we vary them that make for different effects. And our labels kind of shutter us off from recognizing that and allow us to go ahead with our material science willy-nilly, just as if the petri dish is the person.
Yeah, I think this all.
So guys, I'll link that in there as well, because I think it's important. This is stuff that we do not get in school. These are things that even on a communication degree, you're not really looking at things like, right, how neuro-linguistic processing and natural language processing are fully dissected there. maybe in the psychoanalysis portion of psychology, deep psychology, and some of that stuff. But guys, the words that we say obviously have power and meaning, ideas as well. Healthcare providers, pharmacists, doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses, whatever that may be, you've got somebody coming to you in a time of need and time of vulnerability. And there already is like a mild amount of, yes, as was referred, hypnotic power and influence there. And again, where they are using the word putting a hex on your patients, I know, some people, maybe even Christians to some degree could say, oh my gosh, like, I don't believe in hexing. This is not that. And right, as they kind of described later on, again, doctors have labels for everything, right? So maybe a hex is not going to be like a Harry Potter kind of shabam, right? But where you're looking at the power of a negative connotation in your interaction with your doctor, think about what that truly does to people. When I've talked to, as a pharmacist, patients that have had negative interactions with a provider, I'm sure patients have at some point had maybe a negative interaction with me. I can't say I'm perfect every single day. And these are things that you've got to realize there, that there is, a healing power in those words and a nature that, can help or hurt somebody. And from your healthcare provider status, like if your doctor is not empowering you to get better and being a positive optimist, truly, guys, maybe you're in a bad situation there that you're forced to be with some certain doctor, but that's not a doctor that you want. You want a doctor that's going to believe that things are going to get better regardless. You don't want to look at it in a negative light. You're only just going to self-prophesize things. So again, doctors to patients, absolutely. Parents to kids, teachers to students, coaches to players, wherever those situations that might be, bosses to employees, all of that influence there. We don't exactly always think about the words that we say. We are a product of our environment. So how did you grow up? What kind of words were said in the environments around you that you grew up in, where you spent the most time? That's probably the way you're going to talk, right? You are who you are, but always have power to change. Cool, guys. So taking on to the next portion of this segment here, looking at exploring the medical cannabis in cancer. We're going to be kicking off the butt cancer case study here very, very soon. October 1st is, I believe, this weekend. So truly, like, our patients will have their access to get this thing rolling. However, what we're looking at is, just looking at a big study overlooking, medical cannabis and cancer treatment, and what are the things to consider there. We're going to be looking at all of this very soon. Drug interactions, what are some of the most common medical drug interactions between cancer and cannabis, right? A lot of cancer patients will be on warfarin. They may be on antibiotics like macrolides, calcium channel blockers for blood pressure, benzos, cyclosporin, sildenafil, right? A lot of different medications, breathing medications like theophylline, right? Or, HIV medications or other antivirals, clobazam, again, a giant gambit here, as you see. So again, where cannabis may or may not be considered here, you are looking at some of these possibilities of, again, drug interactions. That's why we're always saying, you don't want to start cannabis without consulting with your doctor. And how does it actually work when you're going through it? Start low and go slow, determining the, again, delivery systems, what kind of product are you going to use, filled with, which phytocannabinoids. Maybe the patient may be more useful towards a CBD heavy, blend versus a THC heavy blend, or one or the other. These are things to determine whether or not, when you're talking about your chief complaint, and the things that you're willing to or willing to not tolerate there in your therapy, right? So looking at dosing here, CBD dosing, if you're cannabis naive completely, starting with 15 to 20 milligrams, 2 to 3 times a day. If THC is needed, 1.5 to 2.5 milligram increments. Again, 2.5 milligrams is all it takes to cause a psychological effect. And again, THC dominant preparation should be used at bedtime to limit adverse events. Other things to consider: inhalations, 10 to 15 minutes to really gauge between, edibles, almost even just a once a day or twice a day. So we're going to be going through this in a one-on-one basis with each and every single one of our patients on the study, and I'm excited to do it. I think we do have a lot of promising data to collect, guys, in terms of how people might be choosing to dose it, maybe what kind of therapeutic outcomes we might find, and any other particular data points that we can connect there. So we'll see how everybody chooses to dose. We will match and try to guide that and track that in the best way possible, and compare it against quality of life symptoms, cancer symptoms, so on and so forth. So I'm very excited, guys. That's our Herbal Wellness Corner, brought to you guys by High Horse Cannabis Company. Super cool. So next thing, moving on to here, showing our community spotlight, sponsored by the Tricom Alliance, Mesilla Valley Transportation's golf tournament, guys. Cool thing going on there for them. Charity to benefit the Mesilla Valley Casa here in town. So definitely cool. They are looking for spots. It looks like up until like September, says 29th. That's this Friday. So yes, that's basically what I'm trying to recruit for. If anybody wants to join in and be a part of that, I will share this little post there on the screen. I don't know why my chat is not letting me participate this stuff, but on the Mesilla Valley Transportation social media pages, it definitely will connect you. Sorry about that. Silly chat is not loading, but I'll share my Facebook screen there, guys, for those of you who can see it. That's their page. Join our charity golf tournament and be part of an epic battle for good. By participating, you're not only enjoying a fantastic day on the golf course, but also contributing to raise awareness for Mesilla Valley Casa's vital programs and initiatives. October 6th, Red Hot Golf Club. Registration extended till Friday, September 29th. Don't miss your chance to sign up. Email wecare@mvt.com to learn more. And yeah, Mesilla Valley Casa, if anybody wants to see about what those guys do, for court-appointed special advocates for students, advocating on behalf of foster children in Doña Ana County. So very cool to see that initiative and everything go up. I want to support things that support good things. Okay, lastly, guys, Men's Health Minute, looking at the psychology of the alpha male. All right, so check this one out. We'll watch a video here.
Together we will learn how to decode the cues hidden in body language, words, faces, and even voice tone. Let's captivate with your cues. All the tips in this video come from fascinating research from Darioli and Mast. They found there are specific things that highly charismatic, highly powerful people do. Let's go through each of the things they found, and then I'm going to show you examples of how this looks in real life. Cue number 1, congruent nodding. One thing that we don't realize is happening all the time non-verbally is we're looking to see if someone's nonverbal matches their words. And alphas signal to others they are very confident in their words by aligning their nods with their words. So if they say yes, they agree, it's great, they love it, they accept it, they're shaking their head yes. If they don't agree, I don't think so, I don't really like that, no, I don't think that will work, they're shaking their head no. And they can even do this nod without having any words. You will notice that highly powerful people do this both as they speak and as they listen. So not only are they underlining or bolding their words with yes or no, they're also highlighting other people's words as they listen. The perfect example of this is podcaster, actor, comedian, amazing person, Dax Shepard. So I think Dax Shepard is a true alpha, and he is incredibly good at using nods, both to align and convey his own message. So he nods when he speaks, but he also nods when other people speak. He is one of the top rated podcasts on the planet. He's somehow able to get people to open up to him, to share their confessions, share their stories. How? I think that his nodding is a huge aspect in this, that when people are opening up and talking, he's encouraging them, he's nodding, he's telling them, yes, please keep going. Research has even found that when someone is nodding with us, we speak 3 to 4 times longer. And when someone is saying something upsetting, he's, oh, that's terrible. I can't believe it. How could they do that? I think this is one of the reasons why he is such a great podcast host, that even as an alpha, someone in charge, he's still able to show empathy and mirroring. Remember that being an alpha does not mean that you're not a good listener. It doesn't mean that you have to be the one talking. In fact, Dax Shepard is a great example of an alpha who's a great listener, incredibly empathetic, and focuses on what other people are saying more. And nodding is the cue. Let's take a look at how this works. So watch this interview that Dax Shepard did on CBS this morning. I want you to notice his small but subtle nods that make him extremely captivating.
About the Instagram photos and making life look amazing. Your podcast is the exact opposite.
Yeah, we hope it's a tiny bit of an antidote to the curated life. However great you assume your neighbor's life is from Instagram, of course you then heighten Prince Harry's life that much further, and then you hear, oh no, you cannot escape the slog of life for a human. Like everyone's dealing with
Trauma.
all kinds of things. Yeah. Trauma. Trying to stay healthy.
About 1 million people listen to each episode of Armchair Expert. Padman has been best friends with Shepard and his...
So if you notice here, these aren't huge nods, right? He's not going... No, even when he's listening and he has his headphones on, he's just slowly nodding. As she's talking, he's nodding and nodding along with his words. Then he kind of nods negatively when he's talking about something negative. These are subtle cues that signal, I know what I'm talking about, and I also want to listen to what you're talking about. Action step, nod with your words while speaking and while listening. Cue number 2, reassuring touch. Specifically, the researchers found that charismatic people, especially alphas, tend to touch themselves less and touch others more. Meaning that alphas aren't usually engaging in nervous touch, like cracking their knuckles or touching their chin or rubbing their neck. Those are all signs of nervousness. Rather, alphas typically don't touch themselves at all, signaling high confidence, but are constantly reaching out to give others reassuring touch. Touch of acknowledgement, touch of encouragement, high fives, back touches. I want to show you a couple of different examples of alphas in action. So this first one is Tony Robbins' ultimate alpha. And I want to show you in this video how he reaches out for some reassuring touch.
You're also, everybody here's an entrepreneur and you're fucking amazing. I mean, you're a producer, you're an actor, you're a writer, you're a fucking comedy superstar. Mm-hmm. How do you go from...
Model.
What's that?
Model.
A model.
Model.
I forgot that one. Thank you.
So here Kevin Hart jokingly corrects him, and he's so delighted and surprised that he pats him on the leg to say, yes, that was a good addition. Good joke. That is a reassuring touch. Let's look at another one. This is Tom Cruise. So Tom Cruise uses touch in a very interesting way, in almost a camaraderie kind of a way. And I want you to see, as the laughter is happening, how much touch he's engaging in and how much it encourages the camaraderie. So I think this touch is interesting because clearly when Rebecca Ferguson is reaching out to touch him, he's giving a reciprocal touch. So Tom Cruise was not the first toucher. In other words, he did not reach out to Rebecca Ferguson first. She reached out to give him like, oh, that looked like it hurt. And then he reached out to say, yes, that was awful. Reassuring her to say, yes, I feel the camaraderie. A very interesting way to use touch, not self-touch, but reassuring touch or reciprocal touch. Action step, use touch when it will reassure, calm, or recognize people. Cue number 3, claims space. So one of the things the researchers found is that highly confident people take up space. And I talk a lot about this in cues, that the more space we take up, in fact, when I was thinking about my cover, I wanted to make sure that I was taking up space in the cover because I know that is a signal of high confidence or high competence, that when we feel proud, when we feel confident, we want to claim our space. So you will very clearly see in so many alpha videos, especially if you're around an alpha, they claim their space. They use armrests, they drape their arm around the side of a couch, they spread and stand really wide. They like to claim the space around them. So I want to show you a couple different clips of different alphas claiming space. Specifically, here is Samuel L. Jackson. So I want you to watch Samuel L. Jackson sit on the couch and see how he literally makes himself at home. He takes up and claims his space, which signals his high confidence. Watch.
I love this crowd. What's up? How you doing? I'm awesome. You seem like you're in a great mood right now, huh?
Yeah, man. I mean, how can you be in a bad mood when the Incredibles 2 finally showed up?
That's true.
So do you notice how he does this quite comfortably? He's not walking in the room like, yeah, I'm Rocky. He's just comfortable. He's taking a comfortable seat. He drapes his arm on the chair. He takes up his armrest. He makes broad hand gestures. This isn't in a way that's antagonizing. It's a way that's comfortable. So he claims space in a way that's comfortable. And this is a characteristic of alphas, is that they feel comfortable in their space, and so they claim it. Here's another interesting clip. We have three gentlemen here, Hugh Jackman, Michael Fassbender, and James McAvoy. I want you to notice who the alpha is by how much space he's taking up. There's one gentleman in this group of three who's taking up the most space, and I think he's the most alpha. Take a look.
And now, Wolverine, he no age, he no get younger. I can't. The illusion is complete.
Wolfie. They call me Wolfie. Wolverine. I'm not a wolf, I'm a Wolverine. Yeah. What?
So notice in this video how they're all leaning forward, but Jackman is claiming the most space. So Hugh Jackman claims most space both with his feet, and then by the end of the video, he kind of leans back and rests his arm on the couch. A little bit broader, not aggressively broader, but he's not as tight as the other guys. So if you look at this video, Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy are a little bit close together. Their arms are close to their torso. They're hunched over a lot more. Jackman is much more broad. He's taking up space in his chest. He claims space with his legs and with the couch. We look at the distance between our torso and our arms, this distance right here, to see how closed in are we. When people are really nervous, when people are really afraid, they tend to tighten their arms to their sides, right? They want to protect their torso. You'll notice that Hugh Jackman has a lot of space here. It's one of the reasons why I encourage people that if they want to be seen as more confident, they should use chairs with armrests. And that's because you're more likely to use the armrests, which creates space here. A little tiny cue to help you claim that space naturally. One other small note here is another way that leaders or alphas claim space is they often sit at the head of the table. So you might also notice that the alpha in your life always takes the head chair. Action step. When you feel confident, claim your space. Cue number 4.
Awesome, and we'll get into the rest on this one tomorrow, guys. Got to give you a little bit of meat on the bone there, so that we get a good focus on all that. Take good ways to notice some of that, whatever they may be for you. And again, that's our Men's Health Minute on talking about men in general. That can be applied to both men and women. I know that was a little bit of a dedicated video there from the science of people as far as two men in the situation. But again, for men to think about all good things there, like not to think about how you can be the most dominant alpha male in any of those ways, but in terms of being just aware of your presence in space and the impact that you can be, those are all good things. Women as well can definitely use that. Obviously, looking as it's a woman teaching the class, guys. So I'm not trying to say, alpha is only a male thing in that regard. But, it's very interesting because you look at some of the fluff that may come through from the likes of Andrew Tate and some of these other guys, but they kind of get to the same points of where that gets, and they communicate in different ways. And you can watch kind of how that all kind of plays out. And not to go and dissect a man as being such a barbaric, specimen. That's not what we're trying to get at. It's, you know, what can you learn from? What can you tweak in your own game by just kind of, you know, sitting back and watching that? All good food for content. Otherwise, guys, we'll see you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Let you guys get back to your wonderful Monday evening. Hope everybody has a fantastic